My name is Ellen Hopkins. I'm 36 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother stood at the head of the dining table in front of 17 relatives and announced with a proud smile, "One daughter married a cardiac surgeon, the other cleans toilets." The room went dead silent. Then my father slid a $50 bill across the white linen tablecloth, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Here, go mop something." No one laughed. My sister Veronica just smiled into her wine glass. I didn't flinch. I folded the bill neatly, slipped it into my pocket, and said calmly, "Thank you." What they didn't know was that I had spent the last 12 years building something far bigger than they could imagine. And my 77-year-old grandmother, the only person in that room who knew the truth, had finally reached her limit. She slowly stood up, turned to my mother, and spoke 6 words that shattered the entire evening. But before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. But only if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. And drop a comment telling me, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it there? Now, to understand how we got to that moment. My mother was 17 when she had Veronica. A shotgun wedding in a Northeast Philadelphia church, 1985. She dropped out of community college in her first semester. She never went back. And she spent the next 40 years making sure everyone knew her daughters would do better, that we wouldn't make her mistakes, that we would marry men who could give us the lives she never had. I was born 4.5 years after Veronica, in December 1989. By then, my parents had moved into a narrow row house in Mayfair, a working-class neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business. My father worked as a warehouse supervisor at a logistics company near the port. My mother stayed home, read country living magazines, and planned futures for her daughters that had nothing to do with who we actually were. Veronica was the beautiful one. Blonde, blue-eyed, the kind of girl who looked good in photographs. She got ballet lessons. I got hand-me-down cleats for soccer that nobody ever came to watch. When Veronica turned 12, my mother started teaching her how to sit properly, how to make conversation at dinner parties, how to be the kind of woman men would want to marry. When I turned 12, my mother asked me why I couldn't be more like my sister. I remember being 8 years old, sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to my mother on the phone with her sister. "Veronica's going places," she said. "Ellen, well, we'll see." I went to my room and didn't come out for dinner. The pattern held through high school. Veronica's straight A's earned family dinners at the Italian restaurant on Cotman Avenue. My A- in AP Biology earned a frown and the question, why not an A? When I won 3rd place at the regional science fair for a project on water contamination in Philly neighborhoods, my parents didn't attend the ceremony. They were helping Veronica shop for her Penn State dorm room. Our refrigerator was covered in Veronica's accomplishments. Report cards, cheerleading photos, acceptance letters. My science fair ribbon sat in the corner, half hidden behind a grocery list, held up with a single magnet. When Veronica got into Penn State for pre-med, my mother opened champagne. When I told them I was applying to Temple University, my mother's face fell. "Temple? Ellen, that's a city school. Can't you apply somewhere better?" "I got a full scholarship," I said. "For public health?" "Public health," my mother repeated, like the words tasted bad. "What will you even do with that?" I didn't answer. I'd already learned that my mother didn't actually want answers. She wanted Veronica's life, duplicated. And I would never give her that. What I didn't know then was that my grandmother had been watching this entire dynamic unfold. Grandma Flo, my mother's mother, had raised my mom alone after my grandfather left when she was 3. Flo had worked 2 jobs as a single mother in the 1960s and still found time to get her social work degree at night. She'd spent 40 years working for the Philadelphia Department of Human Services, helping families in crisis, coordinating homeless services, fighting for people nobody else saw. She'd taught my mother that hard work had dignity. My mother had learned the opposite lesson, that hard work meant you'd failed. In the fall of 2007, a few weeks before I started at Temple, I took the bus to South Philly to visit Grandma Flo in her small walk-up apartment. The place was cluttered with files, books about public policy, maps of Philadelphia's social service infrastructure. She made coffee in an old percolator and we sat at her kitchen table while kids played stickball in the street below. "Your mother thinks success looks like a doctor's wife in the suburbs," Flo said, not unkindly. "I spent 40 years learning it looks like clean water, safe housing, and people who give a damn. Which one do you want to be?" I looked at the maps spread across her table. Overlays of poverty rates, disease outbreaks, infrastructure failures, patterns I could see, problems I wanted to solve. "The second one," I said. Flo smiled. "Good. Because if you're brave enough, I want to show you what that actually means." She pulled out a map of Philadelphia with markings in red pen. Neighborhoods where sanitation systems failed. Communities where broken infrastructure led to health crises nobody talked about. The invisible work that kept a city functioning. "These are the places I worked," she said. "These are the people your mother would rather forget we came from. If you choose this path, she won't understand. She might never understand. Can you live with that?" I thought about the refrigerator covered in Veronica's achievements, the science fair ribbon in the corner, the look on my mother's face when I said Temple. "I can live with it," I said. I started at Temple that September. I declared my major as public health with a concentration in environmental health sciences, and I got a part-time job working for campus facilities, cleaning dorm bathrooms for $9.50 an hour. When my mother found out, she was mortified. "You're cleaning toilets? Ellen, that's humiliating. Can't you get an internship at a hospital or something respectable?" "This is respectable," I said. "Not to anyone who matters." I didn't argue, I just kept showing up. I mopped floors, scrubbed sinks, and noticed things. Patterns of mold growth, pipe failures, sanitation breakdowns that affected student health. I started taking notes. I brought questions to my professors. One of them, Dr. Catherine Brennan, saw something in me. "Ellen," she said one afternoon in her cramped office, "you don't just want to study public health, you want to fix systems. That's rare. Don't waste it." She handed me an internship application for the Philadelphia Water Department. "It's not glamorous," she said. "You'll test sewage samples, but you'll learn how a city actually works." I took the application home. My mother saw it on the kitchen table and pushed it aside to make room for Veronica's wedding planning binders. Veronica was engaged by then to Andrew Bennett, a resident in cardiothoracic surgery at Pennsylvania Hospital. They'd met when Veronica was working pharmaceutical sales, making rounds at the hospital. She'd graduated with her pre-med degree but never applied to medical school. She'd taken the sales job instead. 6 months later, she'd met Andrew during a sales call. 2 years later, they were engaged. My mother called it fate. I called it strategy. The wedding was in June 2011, at a garden venue my parents couldn't really afford. 200 guests, a string quartet, my mother in a champagne silk dress she'd saved for months to buy. I was a bridesmaid in an ill-fitting pale yellow dress. In the photos, I'm cropped to the edge of the frame, barely visible while Veronica and Andrew beam in the center. At the reception, my mother toasted both my daughters, but she only looked at Veronica. I slipped outside and texted Grandma Flo, "I'm okay, just counting down until I can leave." She texted back, "You're already gone, honey, they just don't see it yet." She was right. By then, I'd already been accepted to Penn State Harrisburg for my Master of Public Administration. I moved 2 hours away that fall and didn't come back except for mandatory holidays. If you're finding this story familiar, if you've ever been the family member whose achievements don't count because they don't fit the narrative, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story too. I spent those 2 years in Harrisburg living in a cheap one-bedroom, eating ramen, and writing a thesis on waste management equity in urban environments. My thesis committee was impressed. The chair asked if I'd considered policy work. I told him I had a job offer waiting in Philadelphia. I was starting in 2 weeks. In June 2013, 3 days after I defended my thesis, I became an environmental health specialist for the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. Salary, $38,500. I had a cubicle on the 11th floor of a city building on Market Street, a nameplate that read, E. Hopkins, Specialist, and a photo of Grandma Flo on my desk. My job was to inspect restaurants, investigate contamination complaints, and respond to public health hazards. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. That first year, I responded to a Legionnaire's disease outbreak at a nursing home in Kensington. I worked 16-hour days coordinating with the facilities team, testing water systems, implementing emergency protocols. We saved the facility from closure. We prevented deaths. I got an internal commendation. My family never knew. At Thanksgiving that year, someone asked what I did for work. Before I could answer, my mother said, "Oh, Ellen works for the city. Something with cleaning, I think." She smiled apologetically at the table. City sanitation. 17 people nodded politely and changed the subject. My sister Veronica was pregnant with her first child by then. The conversation shifted to baby names, nursery colors, Andrew's surgical schedule. I sat there, finished my meal, and left early. Grandma Flo called me that night. "How bad was it?" "The usual," I said. "When are you going to tell them what you actually do?" "Why?" I asked. "They don't want to know. They want the version of me that makes sense to them. Let them have it." I heard her sigh on the other end of the line. "One day they're going to realize. I can't wait to see their faces." "I'll let you know when it happens," I said. But I didn't think it would. I thought I'd spend my whole life being underestimated by the people who were supposed to know me best, and I'd made peace with that. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would change. In the spring of 2014, I was promoted to senior specialist. I managed a small team of 4 inspectors. My salary jumped to $45,200. At Sunday dinner, I mentioned the promotion. My father said, "That's good." My mother said, "Is that like a supervisor?" I said yes. She said, "For janitors?" I didn't correct her. By 2015, I'd been promoted again, this time to Director of Environmental Health Services. I was 26 years old. I oversaw 25 staff members and a budget of just over $1 million. The city council grilled me for an hour about my lack of experience. I had my MPA, 2 years of field work, and a 98% inspection compliance rate. I got the job. Barely. I was the youngest director in the department's history. People were skeptical. I spent the next year proving I deserved it. My mother never asked about the new title. When people asked what I did, she said, "Ellen works for the city. Public health or something. We're not really sure." Between 2016 and 2017, I spearheaded a department merger, combining waste management, public hygiene, and homeless services sanitation into a single coordinated division. It was politically messy. I sat through tense city council meetings, built coalitions, defended my proposals with data they couldn't argue with. The vote passed narrowly. In 2018, my new title became Executive Director of Municipal Health and Sanitation Services. My staff grew to 120. My salary hit $85,000. I managed contracts with major hospitals, coordinated emergency response protocols, and reported directly to the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. That Christmas, my mother asked if I still worked for the city. I said yes. She nodded and turned to Veronica. "Tell us about Andrew's new lake house." The conversation moved on. I stayed quiet. Because by then, I'd realized something. My mother didn't want to know the truth. The truth was inconvenient. It disrupted the story she'd been telling herself for 30 years. That Veronica had won and I had lost. That one daughter had married up and the other had settled for scraps. Letting her believe I was a failure was easier than fighting to change her mind. And then COVID-19 happened. March 2020. I was 31 years old. The city shut down. My department became critical infrastructure overnight. We coordinated sanitization protocols for public transit, distributed PPE to 40 homeless shelters, implemented emergency hygiene measures for field hospitals. My budget exploded to $48 million in federal emergency funding. My staff expanded to 180 employees working around the clock. I worked 80-hour weeks. I took calls from the mayor's office at 2 a.m. I coordinated with every major hospital in Philadelphia, including Pennsylvania Hospital, where my brother-in-law performed cardiac surgeries in operating rooms my team kept sterile. In June 2020, Grandma Flo got COVID. She was 72, high risk, struggling to breathe. I made calls. I used every professional connection I had to make sure she got into the right ICU, got the right treatment, had the right doctors watching her case. She survived. When she was well enough to talk, I visited her in the hospital. She looked at my visitor badge, Ellen Hopkins, city health official, and started crying. "You did this, didn't you?" she said. "Made sure I got into this unit?" I made some calls. "Ellen, you saved my life." "The doctors saved your life, Grandma." "With equipment and protocols your department provided." She reached for my hand. "I read the papers, honey. I know what you do now. Does your mother know?" "No," I said, "and I'd like to keep it that way." "Why?" "Because I want to see how long she'll believe I'm a failure." Flo squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak but determined. "Promise me something. When the moment comes, when they finally see who you are, don't let them off easy." "I promise." 2 years later, in June 2022, the Philadelphia City Council gave me a commendation for my COVID response leadership. There was a ceremony at City Hall. The mayor gave a speech. Press photographers took pictures. The Philadelphia Inquirer ran a small story in the Metro section with a photo of me shaking the mayor's hand. The headline read, "City Health Director Ellen Hopkins honored for COVID response leadership." I didn't invite my family. I knew they wouldn't come. But Grandma Flo attended. She sat in the front row of the small ceremony room and cried proud tears. Afterward, she carefully folded the newspaper clipping, tucked it into her purse, and said nothing to my mother. "Are you saving that for something?" I asked. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I'm just waiting for the right moment." By 2023, my department had stabilized. Budget, $52.8 million. Staff, 180. My salary, $115,000. I'd been appointed to the mayor's public health task force. I coordinated with hospitals, schools, transit authorities. I managed contracts. I signed compliance certifications. My work was invisible until it failed. And it didn't fail because I was good at what I did. Meanwhile, my family gatherings continued exactly as they always had. At Thanksgiving 2024, exactly 1 year before everything changed, my mother asked, "Ellen, you're still with the city?" "Yes." "That's nice, dear. Stable job." Her tone suggested stable meant stagnant. Then she turned to Veronica. "Tell everyone about Andrew's partnership. He's making partner at the surgical practice next year." Andrew smiled modestly. Veronica beamed. My mother raised her wine glass in a toast. I drank water and left before dessert. Later that night, I sat in Grandma Flo's South Philly apartment, watching old movies and eating Chinese takeout from containers. How much longer are you going to let this go on? She asked. Not much longer, I said. Something's building, I can feel it. I was right. In early November 2025, my mother called. Ellen, Thanksgiving is going to be special this year. Veronica has wonderful news. Andrew's made partner. We're inviting everyone. Uncle Raymond's family, Aunt Cynthia, all the cousins. Make sure you're there. I'll be there, I said. Good. And Ellen? Maybe wear something nice? You know, make an effort? I hung up and texted Flo. Big family Thanksgiving. Mom's planning something. She texted back. So am I. The week before Thanksgiving, my mother called again. Ellen, when people ask what you do, what should I say? I work in public health for the city. But what does that mean? Like health inspections? Something like that. She sighed. You make it so hard, Ellen. Can't you just give me a simple answer? I did. Public health. Well, I'll just say you work for the city. That's easier. After we hung up, one of my colleagues walked past my office. She saw my expression. Your family again? Always. When are you going to tell them what you actually do? Soon, I said. Very soon. The day before Thanksgiving, I drove to Flo's apartment. We sat in her small living room with afternoon light coming through the windows. She made tea. We talked. You don't have to come tomorrow, Grandma. It'll just be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable before, she said. 40 years in social work? You think I can't handle your mother? But why now? Because I'm 77 years old, Ellen. I don't have time left to watch them disrespect you. What if it makes things worse? Worse than them treating you like garbage. She reached into a drawer and pulled out the folded newspaper clipping from 2022. The photo of me with the mayor. I'm bringing this tomorrow. Are you okay with that? I looked at the clipping for a long time. Then I nodded. Yes, I'm ready. Thanksgiving morning, I chose my outfit carefully. A simple black dress. No designer labels. Nothing that would compete with whatever expensive thing Veronica would be wearing. I wanted to look exactly like what my mother thought I was. Unremarkable, unsuccessful, forgettable. It was strategic, because I knew what was coming. I arrived at my parents' house around 2 in the afternoon. The extended family was already there. 17 people total. Uncle Raymond and his wife Diane with their 3 kids. Aunt Cynthia and her husband with their 2 teenagers. Cousins I barely knew. Veronica and Andrew and their 2 children. My mother greeted Veronica at the door with a hug. Oh, you look stunning. Is that Diane von Furstenberg? Yes. Andrew surprised me. My mother turned to me. Oh, Ellen. You're here. That's a nice dress. Her tone made nice sound like mediocre. Thanks, Mom. Inside, the dining table was set for 17. White linen tablecloth, crystal glasses, fall flower centerpiece, place cards in calligraphy. I found mine at the far end of the table between 2 teenage cousins. Veronica's place card was beside my mother's seat at the head of the table. I sat down and smiled slightly. Perfect, I thought. The worse the setup, the better the reversal. Then Grandma Flo arrived. Dinner started with appetizers, shrimp cocktail, expensive cheese, wine flowing. The conversation centered on Andrew's surgical practice, Veronica's children, my cousins' achievements. I stayed quiet. I watched. Flo sat across from me, also watching. After appetizers, my mother stood. She tapped her wine glass for attention. Everyone, I want to make a toast before dinner. The room quieted. 17 faces turned toward her. We are so blessed, she began. Veronica married a cardiac surgeon who literally saves lives every single day. Andrew just made partner at one of Philadelphia's most prestigious surgical practices. Applause. Andrew nodded modestly. Veronica blushed with pleasure. My mother's face changed. She looked at me. And we're proud of both our daughters, of course. Her voice took on that apologetic tone I knew so well. One married a surgeon. The other, well, Ellen cleans toilets for the city. The room went dead silent. Someone set down a wine glass too hard. The sound echoed. I could smell the turkey in the kitchen, not yet carved. I could see the cranberry sauce in its crystal bowl. Untouched. 17 people stared. Then my father pulled out his wallet. He extracted a $50 bill and slid it across the white linen tablecloth. It slid past the cranberry dish and stopped in front of my plate. Ulysses S. Grant's face stared up at me. "Here," my father said, looking me in the eye. "Go mop something." Some people laughed. Uncle Raymond, a couple of teenage cousins. Awkward, uncomfortable laughter. "Honest work, right?" my father added. "Nothing wrong with that." My mother tried to soften it. "Kenneth, stop." She laughed nervously. "I'm sure Ellen works very hard at whatever she does." I looked at the $50 bill. I looked at my father. Then I picked it up. I folded it neatly, exactly in half, then in half again. I slipped it into my pocket. And in the calmest voice I'd ever used, I said, "Thank you, Dad." The room got quieter, more uncomfortable, because I hadn't cried. I hadn't left. I hadn't given them the satisfaction of a reaction. Veronica looked at her plate and whispered, "Ellen." "It's fine," I said. My father shifted in his seat. "I was just joking." "I know." My mother tried to move past it. "Well, let's carve the turkey, shall we?" But before my father could stand, there was a sound, a chair scraping back. Grandma Flo stood up, 77 years old, 5'3", but she commanded that room like she'd commanded 40 years of city council meetings and crisis interventions. "Patricia," she said. My mother looked confused. "Yes, Mother?" "Tell them where your daughter actually works." I just did." "She works in sanitation for the—" Her title. My mother's face went blank. "I don't know her exact title." "That's the problem," Flo said quietly. The room was frozen. 17 people holding their breath. Flo's voice was steady, cold, clear. "Executive Director of Municipal Health and Sanitation Services, City of Philadelphia." Silence. Uncle Raymond spoke first. "Like a manager?" "Like the person who runs the entire department," Flo said. "Budget: $52.8 million. Staff: 180 employees." I watched the information land, watched faces change, watched my mother's wine glass tilt, forgotten in her hand. Aunt Cynthia asked, "How big is the department?" Flo repeated, slower. $52.8 million. 180 employees. My mother found her voice. "Mother, that can't be right. Ellen would have told us if—" "Would she?" Flo asked. "When has anyone in this family ever asked?" Flo reached into her purse. She pulled out the folded newspaper clipping and carefully unfolded it. The photo of me with the mayor. The headline. She slid it down the table like my father had slid the $50 bill. It passed from hand to hand. I watched each person's face as they saw it. Confusion. Surprise. Something like respect. My mother's hands shook as she held the clipping. She stared at the photo. Me in a professional suit, shaking the mayor's hand, accepting a framed certificate. She looked up at me. "Why didn't you tell us?" And for the first time all night, I spoke more than 3 words. "You never asked?" 3 words. 12 years of neglect. The whole room heard it. The silence was broken by buzzing. My phone, in my purse under the table, vibrating against the chair leg. Multiple calls, multiple texts. I'd had it on silent, but the vibration was audible. "Ellen, your phone," Veronica said quietly. I pulled it out. The screen showed 6 missed calls and 4 text messages, all from my department staff, all marked urgent. And now, as I held it, it started ringing again. The caller ID read, Mayor Daniels, office. My father stared. On Thanksgiving? I looked at the screen, then at the table. There's a water quality issue in the Northeast District, elevated lead levels. My mother's voice was faint. Can't someone else handle it? The phone kept ringing. I stood. Excuse me, I need to take this. I walked to the hallway but didn't close the door. They could all hear me. Director Hopkins, I answered. The mayor's assistant briefed me quickly. Lead contamination in the drinking water at 3 Northeast Philadelphia schools. Detected during routine weekend testing. Needed emergency response authorization. My voice shifted. Professional, technical, authoritative. Yes, I'm here. When were they detected? Okay, contact DEP immediately. Activate Level 2 response protocol. Deploy mobile testing units to affected zones. Focus on schools and senior facilities first. I need preliminary assessment by 6 a.m. tomorrow. Yes, I'll be in the office by 5:30. No, this is priority. Thanksgiving doesn't matter when we have potential lead exposure. I hung up and returned to the table. 17 faces stared at me differently now. I slipped my phone back into my purse. Sorry about that. Where were we? Andrew spoke first. His voice was careful. You work with the mayor's office? I report to the deputy mayor for Health and Human Services. The mayor's office coordinates with my department during public health emergencies. How often does that happen? Depends on the crisis. During COVID, we had daily briefings, less urgent situations, weekly check-ins. Veronica whispered, Jesus, Ellen. Flo wasn't done. She leaned forward. Ellen, tell them about the hospital contracts. And here's the thing about public humiliation. When it gets reversed, you can either grind people into the dirt, or you can maintain your dignity. I chose the second option. I always would. My department manages sanitation and public health coordination agreements with every major hospital in the city. I said calmly, including Pennsylvania Hospital. Andrew's face went pale. What does that involve? He asked quietly. Medical waste disposal, infectious material handling, emergency sanitization protocols. We conduct quarterly inspections of all operating room suites and high-risk facilities. I paused. I signed off on your OR recertification 3 weeks ago, November 2nd. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's watch ticking. Your surgical suite stays sterile because my team does its job, I continued. Without us, you don't operate. That's how public health infrastructure works. Veronica stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Uncle Raymond cleared his throat. $52 million? Ellen, that's a massive budget. It's adequate for the scope of work. How do you manage that kind of money? Carefully. Annual budget proposals to City Council, quarterly reviews, federal grant compliance, contract negotiations with vendors and partner institutions. Do you have an accounting degree? MPA, Master of Public Administration. I also have a team of budget analysts. One of my teenage cousins asked, How much do you make? My mother gasped. That's rude. But Flo answered, 6 figures. Last I checked, Ellen's salary was $115,000. My mother dropped her fork. Flo kept going. She'd waited 12 years for this moment and she wasn't stopping now. During COVID, Ellen's department coordinated PPE distribution for 40 homeless shelters, sanitization protocols for the entire SEPTA system, and emergency hygiene infrastructure for field hospitals. Veronica's voice was barely audible. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, Flo said. None of you asked. You were too busy assuming Ellen was a failure. My father tried to defend himself. We never said. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. Every single family gathering for 12 years. My mother's voice cracked. Ellen, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I looked at her. Really looked at her. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. But why didn't you correct us? I did. I told you I worked in public health. I told you I had promotions. You heard sanitation and stopped listening. I would have been proud if I'd known. Would you? I pulled the $50 bill from my pocket, unfolded it, placed it on the table in front of my father. Or would you have found something else to criticize? My lack of husband? My lack of children? My unfeminine career choice? That's not fair. Neither is tipping me $50 to go mop in front of 17 relatives. The truth hung in the air. Heavy. Undeniable. Veronica spoke quietly. Ellen, I knew you had some kind of management role. I thought maybe you were like a supervisor or something. I should have asked. I'm sorry. You should have asked, I agreed. But you didn't. You watched them humiliate me at every holiday for years. You said nothing. You let Mom introduce me as the daughter who cleans toilets at your baby shower. You smiled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. It made you look better by comparison. Veronica's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. Andrew put his hand on her arm, a protective gesture. I recognized it for what it was. Concern for his wife, not solidarity with me. I looked at him. I don't hate you, Veronica, but I'm done pretending this is okay. Several of my cousins spoke up then, apologizing, saying they didn't know. Aunt Cynthia looked at my mother with something like reproach. Pat, I can't believe you didn't know what your own daughter did for a living. My mother tried to defend herself. She never explained properly. Did you ever ask? Aunt Cynthia pressed. No one answered. I stood. I'm leaving. Grandma, you coming? Flo stood too, reaching for her walker. My mother panicked. Ellen, please don't go. We can fix this. Mom, you can't fix this with a conversation. My voice was calm, steady. This isn't one mistake. This is 12 years of you deciding I wasn't good enough. Every holiday, every Sunday dinner, every phone call. You made it clear that I was the disappointing daughter. I never meant. Yes, you did. You meant every word. Because I didn't marry a doctor. Because I didn't have kids. Because I chose a career you didn't understand and didn't respect. You decided I was a failure, and you treated me accordingly. My father asked quietly, What do you want from us? I considered the question. What did I want? I want you to understand that respect isn't optional. If you want me in your life, I won't come to events where I'm treated as less than. I won't listen to comparisons between me and Veronica. I won't accept dismissive comments about my work. Those are my terms. That's reasonable, my father said. My mother was crying now. Ellen, we're family. Family means treating each other with dignity. You haven't done that. Until you can, I'm keeping my distance. I walked toward the door. Flo followed, her walker clicking on the hardwood floor. My mother called after us. Ellen, wait. I didn't turn around. I opened the front door. Cold November air rushed in. Flo paused at the threshold. She turned back to my mother one last time. Patricia, she said quietly, you raised a daughter who saves lives every single day, who protects 1.5 million people from disease, who runs a multi-million-dollar operation with integrity and competence, and you called her a toilet cleaner in front of her entire family. My mother sobbed. I didn't know. You should have asked. You're her mother. Flo turned and walked out with me. The door closed behind us. We heard my mother crying inside. We heard voices rising, questions, recriminations. We walked carefully down the front steps. I helped Flo with her walker. Our breath was visible in the cold air. In my car, Flo asked, How do you feel? I sat there for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Processing. Free. I finally said. If you've ever had to set boundaries with people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, you know how hard it is. But you also know how necessary it is. If this resonates with you, leave a comment. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this. I drove Flo back to her apartment. We ordered Chinese food and watched Casablanca on her small TV. We sat on her couch with takeout containers on the coffee table, eating in comfortable silence. Did I go too far? Flo asked during a commercial break. No, you went exactly far enough. Your mother's going to call. A lot. I know, I'm not answering for a while. Good, make her sit with it. Grandma? Yes? Thank you. For seeing me. Always. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Oh, honey, that was never hard. My phone started buzzing in my purse. I pulled it out. Patricia Hopkins. Calling. I turned the phone to silent and went back to the movie. For the first time in years, I felt real peace. The week after Thanksgiving was quiet. My mother called 6 times. I didn't answer. She texted. November 29th. Ellen, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. November 30th. Ellen, I understand you're hurt, but you should have been honest with us. December 1st. You embarrassed me in front of the entire family. Was that necessary? On December 2nd, I blocked her number. Work was a different story. That Monday, I was in my office by 5:30 a.m., coordinating the lead contamination response. By noon, we'd deployed testing teams to 12 facilities. By 6 p.m., we'd identified the source, corroded pipes in a water main serving 3 elementary schools. By the end of the week, we'd implemented emergency protocols and started infrastructure repairs. A colleague noticed my efficiency. You okay? You seem focused. I had a good Thanksgiving, I said. On December 8th, my phone rang. Not my mother. Veronica. I answered. Hello. Ellen, can we talk, please? I was quiet for a moment, then. Okay. We met for coffee in Center City the following week. Veronica looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. She'd brought letters from Andrew. Apologies, typed and hand-signed, awkward but sincere. Andrew wanted to write you directly, but I told him to give you space. This is his letter. I read it. Andrew acknowledged being wrong about essential workers. He mentioned that his hospital had a sanitation crisis the previous week, a broken pipe, or suite contaminated. My team had fixed it in 6 hours. He'd called me personally to thank me. He'd sounded surprised we were competent. I mentioned this to Veronica. He sounded shocked that we knew what we were doing. He was, Veronica admitted. We both were. That's the problem, isn't it? Yes. She looked at me for a long time. I knew you weren't just a cleaner. I knew you had some kind of position, but I never asked what exactly, because it felt easier not to. Because it was easier to let Mom's version stand. Yes, I'm sorry. You were complicit, Veronica, for 12 years. I know, I want to do better. Then do better, but I need time first. Can we try? She asked. To rebuild this? I folded Andrew's letter and put it in my purse. We can try. But Veronica, if we do this, it has to be different. I'm not the little sister who takes scraps anymore. I understand. We finished our coffee in careful conversation. Not warm, but not cold either. A beginning, maybe. Or maybe just a ceasefire. On December 15th, my father sent me an email. Formal, awkward, but genuine. Ellen, I owe you an apology. I worked in a warehouse for 30 years and never felt like I was good enough. When you chose public service instead of the private sector, I thought you were making my same mistake. I was wrong. You found meaning in your work. I just found a paycheck. I'm sorry I couldn't see what you were building. If you'll give me another chance, I'll try to understand. Dad. I read it twice. I wrote back. Dad, I'll consider it. But I won't attend family dinners where I'm disrespected. That's non-negotiable. I hit send. On December 18th, my department held its annual holiday party. 180 employees crammed into a city building conference room with modest decorations and potluck food. My staff gave me a framed photo, all of us together, me in the center, and a card signed by everyone. I read the messages later in my office. "You're the best boss I've ever had. Thank you for seeing us. You're the reason I stayed in this field." I pinned the card to my bulletin board next to commendations, thank you notes, and team photos. Evidence that my work mattered. Evidence that I mattered. That afternoon, my phone rang. The mayor's office. "Director Hopkins, congratulations. We're promoting you to Deputy Chief of Public Health Operations. Expanded portfolio, salary increase to $135,000. We'll announce next week." I thanked them, hung up, sat in my office looking at the framed photo of my team. This was my real family, the people who saw my work, who valued it, who knew what I did because they did it with me. In January 2026, the promotion was announced publicly. I moved into a new office, bigger corner view of City Hall. The nameplate being installed read, "Ellen Hopkins, Deputy Chief Public Health Operations." While unpacking boxes from my old office, I found the $50 bill in a drawer, the one from Thanksgiving. I'd kept it. I looked at it for a long time. Then I donated it to the Homeless Services Fund with a note. "In honor of essential workers everywhere." In February, I agreed to lunch with my parents. Public place, 1 hour. I set a timer on my phone. My mother cried. "Ellen, I've spent 3 months thinking about what I did. I was wrong. I was cruel. I let my own insecurities make me blind to your achievements." "Yes, you did. Can you forgive me?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "Eventually, maybe. But not today. Today I can only offer this. A chance to start over. Slowly." "What does that look like?" my father asked. "You treat me with respect. You don't compare me to Veronica. You ask about my work and actually listen. If you can't do that, we don't have a relationship." My mother wiped her eyes. "Can we try?" "We can try, but I'm not promising anything beyond civility." The hour ended. I left. It wasn't warm. It wasn't healing. But it was a boundary, clearly drawn, and I could live with that. Over the next month, I built my life more intentionally. Dinners with department leadership, weekly calls with Flo, quarterly public health conferences. I filled my apartment with photos of colleagues and mentors, not family. I built chosen family. In March, I was invited to speak at Temple University's public health program. The auditorium was packed. 200 students, faculty, professionals. I stood at the podium and talked about essential infrastructure, about the dignity of work that keeps cities running, about being invisible until the day you're not there. My grandmother taught me that essential work is essential, regardless of whether your family understands it. I said, "The people who keep cities running, who ensure clean water flows and waste is removed, and disease is prevented. We're invisible until the day we're not there. Then everyone remembers. Don't wait for recognition to know your work matters. Do the work because it matters." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. A standing ovation. Grandma Flo was in the front row, crying proud tears. After the speech, students lined up with questions. One asked, "How did you stay motivated when people didn't see your value?" I thought about that $50 bill sliding across the tablecloth, about my mother's voice saying cleans toilets in front of 17 people, about 12 years of being underestimated. "I stopped waiting for external validation," I said. "I found people who saw my work for what it was, and I let that be enough." The student nodded, writing that down. That evening, I returned to my office. There was a sticky note on my monitor from a team member named Jamie. Director Hopkins, watched your temple speech on YouTube. You're the reason I didn't quit after my family told me public health was beneath me. Thank you for showing me it's not. Jamie. I read it twice, then I pinned it to my bulletin board alongside all the others. Later, my phone buzzed. A text from Flo. Proud of you today? Come over Sunday? I'll make pierogies. I smiled and typed back. I'll bring the sour cream. Today, I still run the same department. Well, technically, I oversee multiple departments now as deputy chief. But I still manage the infrastructure most people never see. The toilets still flush. The waste still gets removed. Disease outbreaks still get prevented. All because of work that remains invisible until it fails. And I've learned that visibility isn't the same as value. Some of the most important work in the world happens in the places no one's looking. The early morning sanitation crews, the water treatment operators, the inspectors who prevent outbreaks before they start. The people who clean, maintain, and protect the systems we all depend on. I'm okay being invisible now. Actually, I'm proud of it. Because I know what I do matters. My team knows. The 1.5 million people in Philadelphia who drink clean water and don't get sick from contaminated food. They benefit from my work whether they know my name or not. And my family? We're still rebuilding. Slowly. With boundaries that I enforce. My mother and I have lunch once a month. We talk about safe topics. She's learning to ask questions. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Veronica and I text occasionally. She's trying. It's not perfect, but it's better. My father sent me a birthday card last month with a handwritten note, proud of the work you do, even if I don't always understand it. It was enough, but the relationship that matters most is the one I have with myself. I don't need my parents to understand my worth anymore. I don't need Veronica's validation. I don't need anyone to tell me that what I do is important. I know it is. And that knowledge, that certainty, is freedom. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people who are supposed to believe in you, you're not alone. Thank you for listening.